Who were going to quit the department and still had classified information. So they utilized different types of drugs and pain and hypnosis and electric shock to try and get the guys to forget. Then they also did experimentations to using different chemicals to see if you can induce a person to commit a crime or induce him to do that or to do this. Of course, the CIA claimed that it didn't carry it through. The documentation we got was actually that they did that. Then we came across the overall project called MK Ultra. Its earlier code name was Artichoke, and that included 149 sub-projects.
149.
Yeah. And those sub-projects range from what I just described to open-air testing in the United States, experimentation on prisoners, experimentation on soldiers, experimentation on college students.
Would these people know they were being experimented on and gave their approval?
No, except for the quote-unquote voluntary Army soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
And the way the voluntary Army program worked is it started in 1959, and the guys were just told that they would be doing experimentation on new weapons, right? And then they get to Fort Detrick, Maryland, where the experimentation was done, and find out that they were going to be doing it on drugs and chemicals. But they were never told what they would be experimented on. You know, they just knew that they went crazy for a couple of days or so forth and so on, and then years later have similar things to the guys who have had Agent Orange, because there's one chemical that was used called BZ, and it's 100 times stronger than LSD. It's a very gross drug that causes a person to totally go out of his head for at least 12 hours, sometimes up to 2 to 3 weeks, where he doesn't even know where he is or who he is.
Are there residual effects to BZ?
Yes. Now, the Army at first said that they'd done testing to discover it, and they said there weren't any residual results.
It's harmless. It's harmless. They always say that.
Right. And we did a campaign to find the soldiers who had been experimented on, and we found approximately 40 in the U.S., all of which have been experiencing extreme emotional and physical upset since that time, you know, with children with birth defects, the same sort of thing as Agent Orange. But the Army, as part of the CIA's experimentations, wanted to simulate chemical biological warfare attacks and to see what effect it would have on different Americans, how far it could go in, and so forth, and also test to see how they could use it on other countries. The different kinds of things that they did without the citizens' permission anytime on any of these tests was...
Or even knowing about it?
Oh, no.
No.
Of course not. You know, they didn't even say they were going to do a test, you know. They experimented with the use of mosquitoes, where they just let tons of mosquitoes go in South Carolina. And just to test how far the mosquitoes would go, because they had the idea that maybe if they used a particular strain of mosquitoes in, say, Soviet Russia, then those guys aren't immune to yellow fever, because they don't have yellow fever there. Then Russia could be infected.
And to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. He used many pain induction techniques, but as I got older, I resisted more and more.
For experimental research state that, quote, in order to keep more funding coming from different sources for radiation and mind control projects, he suggested stepping up the amounts of stressors used and also the blackmail portion of the experiments. He said it needed to be done faster than to get rid of the subjects, or they were asking for us to come back later and haunt them with our remembrances. There's much more I could tell you about government-sponsored research, including project names, sub-project numbers, people involved, facilities used, tests, and other forms of pain induction. But I think I've given more than enough information to recommend further investigation of all the mind control projects, especially as they involve so much use of the radiation. I would love nothing more than to say that I dreamed all this up and need just to forget it. But that would be a tragic mistake. It would also be a lie. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the...
Between 1972 and 1976, he and his assistants were sometimes careless and left the cage unlocked. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel. Included in these files were project, sub-project, subject, and experiment names with some code numbers for radiation and mind control experiments, which I have submitted in your written documentation.
And all under the guise of defending our country. It is because of the cumulative effects of exposure to radiation, chemicals, drugs, pain, and subsequent mental and physical distress that I've been robbed of the ability to work and even to bear any children of my own. It is blatantly obvious that none of this was needed, nor should it ever have been allowed to take place at all. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects and through another presidential commission on mind control. I believe that every citizen of this nation has the right to know just what is fact and what is fiction. It is our greatest protection against the possibility of this ever happening again. In conclusion, I can offer you no more than what I've given you today, the truth. And I thank you for your time.
As the evidence suggests, some of these people were used in radiation experiments. There might be information in the mind control experiment files on radiation experiments. We need this information to help in the rehabilitation and treatment of many people who have severe psychological and medical problems which interfere with their social, emotional, and financial well-being. Finally, I urge you to recommend an investigation into these matters. Although there was a commission on mind control, it did not include experiments on children because most of them were too young or still involved in the research in the late 1970s to come forward.
The story of these activities. We are professing to tell you the complete story that we know. Right. But these records that we've uncovered don't tell the story. They tell pieces of it.
This is a story that has been
told very rapidly because it was an IV injection, and things became very furry and very frightening, and had a lot of sensations that it's very difficult to recall. Nobody explained it to me. Nobody ever asked me if I was willing to do it. I thought this was the coldest and most impersonal treatment that anybody could give to anybody in the world. And I became more and more despondent and more angry. I just became so despondent that I thought I can't live like this any longer. And I thought I would just go out and throw myself underneath the cars on McGregor. I stood on the curb of that street and I stood there and I thought, okay, go. Okay, go. And then I thought, what if you're not killed? What if you're just maimed? What if you don't die and you live and you can't even talk anymore? And I couldn't do it. They cried and they were very disoriented. And we were very afraid of the sleep room. We used to walk very carefully against the side of the corridor that was opposite the sleep room with our backs to the wall when we... Well, I'm glad he was concerned for the staff. But damn it all, I wouldn't... I could have maybe had a different kind of life. And that makes me angry and sad, and I don't know how to explain how I feel, really. I just...
How did you feel when you learned that Dr. Cameron's experimentation was financed by the CIA?
Well, I thought... Oh, I can't even use the word that I thought, because I thought, that bastard. And he was too smart. He knew who he was working for. And, excuse me, but I just can't, sometimes I can't believe it, and yet I know it's true.
If you had the opportunity to say something to the people at the Central Intelligence Agency who financed this study, what would you say?
Experimentation for my entire adult life, and possibly may have been a victim since my childhood. I have been targeted with ongoing microwave weapons, as well as drugging with neurotoxic contaminants covertly placed on articles of clothing, as well as on other personal possessions. I believe my being a non-consensual human test subject is related to the CIA's MK-Ultra behavior modification program that began in the 1950s. Moreover, after I read a July 1963 CIA MK-Ultra report that became unclassified in 1994 and emphasized that it would be necessary to test unwitting citizens in their ordinary day-to-day activities without their knowledge in the final stage of the testing program, I believe that I could be one of those many thousands of civilians that were unwittingly tested in the CIA's behavior modification program.
Now that we can use this by stimulating over the prefrontal cortex to influence mood both in pathologic states like depression or even in healthy controls, we can subtly cause people to be happier or sadder.
The technology was first used to explore how the brain controlled movement. But more and more, doctors are using magnetic brain stimulation to help lift the spirits of depressive patients. But could it be used to plant specific ideas into a person's head?
What we're doing is we are either heightening or diminishing regional activity in our brains, and our brains obviously have mechanisms to regulate moods, just as we regulate our heart rate or other things. And what we're beginning to do is to be able to use this to understand those regulatory systems and kind of push them one way or another.
But what about the possibility of reading people's thoughts? Using brain imaging tools, doctors can observe the brain activity associated with specific thoughts or behaviors.
It would be possible to not only read the emotional states, but perhaps to induce the emotional states by turning on or off certain regions and then also taking a picture. So although we don't have the ability right now to take a map of the brain and say whether someone's happy or sad or angry, that's not far away, I don't think.
At the height of the Cold War, both sides sought to perfect mind control or brainwashing techniques. Could magnetic brain therapies and brain mapping be used to control people by tampering with their emotions or memory?
Well, it's a powerful new tool that, just like nuclear reactions, can be either used to harness energy or misused for atomic bombs. And with the ability to go in and push and pull brain regions, you can use that in therapy, which is what we're doing here, or potentially use it for misencoding of information or other things like that. So just like any tool that our society has, it's really up to us as a society to make sure that it's used properly.
The ultimate spy, however, is unlikely to be bound by the same code of ethics as scientists. They'll use whatever tools they can. In San Francisco, California, those tools might already be in development. Cheryl Welsh maintains that the U.S. government is testing mind control on unknowing victims.
Well, basically, I'm networking on the internet, and this is a worldwide international problem. The International Red Cross has a 1990 article which discusses the fact that many major superpowers, many industrialized countries, are researching electromagnetic technology for anti-personnel uses, and the technology is highly classified.
Cheryl believes that she and others are the victims of this mind control research.
Many of the victims that I network with describe hearing voices and microwave illness, where they have headaches, just generally sleep disturbances, sunburns even though it's at night, just microwave effects.
Microwaves and other radio frequencies are known to affect the human body. But could they be responsible for voices in people's heads? In Chicago, Illinois, a world authority on microwave hearing shows how it could work.
I'm hearing a microwave pulse like a click. It sounds like a chirp with a tonal quality to it.
Professor James Lynn is hearing sounds that aren't there. But he's not crazy. Pulses of microwave energy are being generated and fired at him from behind.
Microwaves can be heard depending on the individual, depending on the hearing acuity of the individual. Individuals with a fairly normal hearing can hear microwaves at quite a low level.
The energy of the absorbed microwaves causes brain tissue to very slightly heat up and expand, causing a pressure wave to be picked up by the hearing mechanism in the inner ear. Professor Lynn is far from hearing voices, but it could be possible to send coded signals to an agent this way.
Brain is an electrical organ. It is susceptible to electrical signals. Since microwave is electrical, therefore, in principle, one could embed or encode information in the microwave signal such that it could be perceived by the brain.
It may be some time before we can control someone's thoughts, but we could influence them, perhaps even send secret instructions at a distance. Instead of breaking into a secure installation, the ultimate spy could control someone on the inside and have their dirty work done for them. But why stop with individuals? If the ultimate goal of the ultimate spy is ultimate power, could whole populations be controlled? The answer is frightening. Before and during World War II, leaders manipulated the public opinion with a potent new info weapon: propaganda. By controlling what people believed, ministries of
which the government controls the minds of everyone around her.
Wherever I go about in my day, people will spit, swear, blow smoke in my face, basically 100 insults a day.
The purpose, Cheryl says, is to observe how she reacts so the government can study her mind and eventually use the same technology to control the minds of America's enemies. If that sounds crazy to you, Cheryl says the government is succeeding.
You discredit the enemy. You make them look like a kook. And if you can imagine the government's motive, if you can read a person's mind, you're not going to reveal that for anything.
She's not the only one. Cheryl has organized a group called Citizens Against Human Rights Abuse that has attracted hundreds of self-proclaimed victims from California and all over the world.
I'm just trying to organize, I guess, and gather the information and get the information out, because I don't think the public has it.
She's gathered documents like this from the United Nations that suggest banning electromagnetic weapons because of their biological effects on people. She's also collected papers that she says shows long-term American goals.
I've got the documents from NASA, from Federal Times, from back in the 70s, the DIA, talking about how they were going to use this microwave hearing to drive political targets crazy.
Welsh says more and more people are stepping forward to say now it's coming true. On special assignment.
Some of the experiences are voice to skull, where voices are transmitted to a person from a distance, remote viewing, where a person can be watched in their homes or picked out of a crowd, shocks given to the body, paralyzation of the body, levitation of body parts, gang stalking, where people are followed around, careers and jobs ruined with false allegations, mobbing in stores where people crowd or surround a target, and some of the other symptoms could be a combination of all these types of torture. A lot of these symptoms are mischaracterized as being mental illness. A lot of these symptoms could cause a person to become ill, physically ill. Assassinations are carried out by persons being controlled and directed in these ways. The mind can become confused, a person is overwhelmed, and there's no way to...
President Clinton mandate a presidential inquiry on mind control experiments. I received on my face last night.
I've spoken to probably 3,000 people. He's on probably 1,500. He's on 5,000. There's a lot of us across the U.S. And there's certain statistics, I think, that if you find that there is something going on wrong, that you're going on wrong, that somewhere along the line somebody has to do an investigation. There's a certain percentage of illness. You do an investigation. If there's a certain amount of cancers in an area, same as Brockovich went and did the investigation, she found a certain amount. Well, we're presenting our case right now. You said you guys wanted to be in the know. We're giving you the information now so that you are in the know. There is something going on. It's electromagnetically issue, and it has to do with from cell phones all the way to directed energy. And I think yesterday some of the colleagues went ahead and said that we didn't really talk about whether there's energy weapons or not, but I mean, we have thousands and thousands of documentations about energy weapons themselves, and all we're asking for is an investigation on this. People are being harmed. People are